the end of the day, selling is transferring a feeling. If you don't have the feeling, you can't transfer it. If you don't have a good, positive feeling, dude, you're an actor. You have to sell and run your business from a place of positivity. And however you get there, God bless you. Welcome to the Pete Primeau Show. It is episode 107, and we are here with my friend Patrick Tinney, and we're going to be talking about negotiating in 2023. But first, let me pay the bills very quickly. If you haven't bought my book, Sell a Million, what are you waiting for? 101 tips for furniture and mattress store owners to sell another $1 million or more this year. Guys, if you have not joined the Mattress Industry Network group, what are you waiting for? Steve, thank you so much for sponsoring my show. And if you do not belong to the Mattress Industry Network group, what are you waiting for? If you want to learn how to build, market, sell, and succeed in the mattress industry, this is the place for you. It's a group run by retailers for the benefit of the entire industry. Meet great new suppliers, meet fellow store owners like you, meet fellow salespeople like you, and manufacturers reps. If you're not in here, you're missing the boat. And I got drug into this thing, kicking and screaming by my friend Jeff Giannakovo, who, by the way, is having knee replacement surgery today. So say a prayer for my friend Jeff Giannakovo today. And with that, thank you, Steve. And if you join the group, Mattress Industry Network group, which is a free Facebook group, just say hi to me and say Pete sent me. I'll be glad to look forward to your questions, your comments, and your posts. Scan me. And without a further ado, let's get going. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Pete, happy to be on. How are you?
I'm awesome. So anybody that doesn't know Patrick, he has written the book, Unlocking Yes, Sales Negotiation Lessons and Strategy. The bonus round, which is not only a sales book, but it's a history of the advertising business book. And Perpetual Hunger for you sales reps out there. If you don't buy this book, you're absolutely foolish. Patrick, what I want to do today is I want to do our best to pretend like nobody else is here other than acknowledging a few of our friends who might have a question, and just pretend like we're talking. All right. And so I'm going to start this. We've had some unbelievable talks, and we both said to the other one, why didn't we record this? This would have been so good. I mean, just right. How many times have we said that?
No, it's true. It's true.
It's unbelievable. So why is negotiating in 2023 different than any other time? That's what I want to lead off with.
Yeah. So I think you were one of the earliest guys to use the R word, and we won't finish the R word, but we know what the R word means. And so what we've seen is a fairly steep rationalization of jobs in Silicon Valley. And I think it's been one of these times in the corporate world where companies are able to kitchen sink it, and they go back to thinking lean. When they start thinking lean, they just don't think lean about themselves. They think lean about everybody who walks through that front door of their building.
Yep. 100%. So one of the things that I think about when I think about negotiating, I think that it's a skill. I think that the underlying piece of it is knowledge, but it's like a great athlete. You know, we watched the Super Bowl yesterday. A lot of people watched the Super Bowl yesterday, and we marveled at some of the great feats of athleticism that we saw. And the truth of the matter is, you would never see performances like that unless those professional athletes were committed to their craft and they worked out on a regular basis. So these guys watch game films more than any high school player, more than any college player. Their livelihood is on it. They know every move that player is going to make across from them. And if they don't, they won't be a professional football player for long. They work out, they break
Yep.
it down a muscle to make it stronger. And I believe, and you put this thought in my head, Patrick, because you know that I'm a contrarian. Like anything that you say to me, I'm going to automatically question mark it and push back. And you said something to me, and I tried pushing back on it, and I found out that I couldn't. And basically, if you don't work a muscle, it gets weaker, it
Yep.
atrophies. And I believe that our negotiating muscles on both sides of the fence have atrophied
Yep.
over the last 2 to 3 years.
Yep.
Eh,
I think Zoom has. I commented the other day on a post up on LinkedIn. I actually think that Zoom is killing parts of our EQ. We know what's happening with our children. Their critical decision making part of their brain is not growing at the speed that it should be. So I'll give you you say, well, how you know? There's a teacher in the area that I live in, and I engage him quite often. And I said, "How's it going in the class?" Because I'm obviously very interested in our future leaders. These children, they've got to keep pace at the very least with what's going on in the world. And he says, I try to get them to do exercises, and he said, if it's a blackboard, they won't do it. If it's on their computer, they'll do it.
Wow.
So I think I really think we've got a problem there. The other problem is negotiating deals. As you know from my book Unlocking Yes, the Revised Edition, that I dedicate a lot of time to talking about, can you negotiate over a phone? Can you negotiate, using other communication vehicles? The answer is yes. You can negotiate. You can negotiate using email, which is to me substandard because people think they can get away with a lot with the written word. When you have somebody in front of you and you can see what's happening with their face, I think you get a much better read. The problem is that we're missing. It's like I said, I was on the Italian sales podcast by my friend Tobia, and I said, what if you could only see the top half of the statue of David? What would you have? He said it to me, Pat, you gotta have a conversation, eh?
Exactly.
What do you think? So to me, that's critical. And I am absolutely certain that there's going to be a big drive to get people back in offices. There's a lot of people who naturally, if they work in a very large territory, they would consider working out of their house. Like if you're driving all over a couple of states, or in our particular case, a province. I don't know if you realize how big Ontario is, but it takes over 20 hours to drive from the edge of Ottawa to the edge of Winnipeg. 20 hours to get across Ontario, and that's really booting it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big province. So we understand that some people would naturally be out of their homes, but here's the big but. The big but is that the really big deals, the really big commerce happens in the largest cities in your country and in my country. So in Canada, it's Toronto. Commute across Toronto. Calgary, it's the head office for everything oil, everything wheat. You think about Ottawa, that's our nation's capital. You think about Montreal, that is an enormous city that, oddly enough, a lot of people don't know it, there's a lot of pharmaceutical companies down there. So there's, you know, and you
reading. We're reading everything. Um, and if we've negotiated with the partner before, we're looking for certain tells that we've seen before. And it's harder to see those tells on Zoom, especially if the resolution isn't good, as versus being in person. So I do worry about that. Let's go back before we even negotiate. How do we earn the right to be in the room, Patrick? Because I believe this is what separates your success from everybody else's. You were willing to go the extra mile in terms of preparation, and you knew more about the companies that you were negotiating with and the personalities that you were negotiating with than probably anyone else. And the amount of detailed preparation uh, that you have gone through has always impressed me and has always been a beacon, something that I aspire to, because I'm like, I thought I was good, but I didn't go that far. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, you know, here's the thing: when you're dealing with some of the biggest, you know, brands in North America and the world, quite frankly, you know, you have to be able to think like them. And what you want to be able to do is you want to speak fluent whatever they are. And culture is the basis for understanding how others think and believe. And not only does this happen by company, it happens by country. And I'm very sensitive to this, by the way. Um, so I would spend a lot of time just studying companies. So, for instance, when Toys R Us came to Canada, I was probably the first media person to speak to them. And, you know, I was just all over. All right. So I have to know about Jeffrey. I have to know about Mr. T, David Hasselhoff, who were there at that very moment. They were the biggest stars because they would always use these big stars for store openings. And, you had to get your head around it. I used to actually dedicate one day of my holidays when I would come down to the States from Canada just to do store visits. I just wanted to do site visits, and I would go to places. I'd go to the traditional malls for sure, but then I would go to the freestanding big box malls. I remember walking into Lowe's in Tarpon Springs, and I'm walking around and I'm looking up at all the signage, and I walk by this guy who's having a quiet conversation with an employee. And as I walk by him and I'm looking up, he goes, "Excuse me, sir. Nobody walks around in a Lowe's looking at the ceiling." That's what happens in Home Depot. And I used to work at Home Depot. We have a totally different way of looking at merchandise. And so what we do, rather than stack them tall, we bring them down a little bit lower. So it becomes more of a natural sight line for the customer when they come in the store. And I said, "Wow, that's really cool." I said, "So let me identify myself, because I don't think it's fair for me to, walk into your store and eat up anybody's time if you're really busy." But I work with the largest media company in Canada. There's a belief in Canada that you're making plans to head up, and I wanted to understand as much about the way that you greet customers in this setting, the way that you solve problems, just the speed, the tempo. There's always a tempo with retail. There's always this ambiance. It's almost like if you wear nice perfumes and aftershave, there's just, you remember that smell. Every store kind of has a smell, and that there's only one way to describe it, and it also has this sense of excitement. So it's either very exciting, it's kind of mellow, or it's like it's a morgue. And I really prefer walking in and just getting that red hot vibe when I'm going in. It's like I want the full buying experience, and I think that as customers become sort of getting off topic here, but as they become more educated, they know what they want. But I think part of what they miss is that amazing buying experience. The buying experience to me is like us as professional salespeople asking really, really, really super smart, visionary exploration question.
If you if you're talking to a buyer for a mattress store or a furniture store, or the owner, oftentimes in smaller stores, the owner and the buyer are the same person, and they're watching this and they're like, okay, we've got Patrick Tinney here. He's the expert on negotiation. What is your advice to them? And I'd like you to kind of fold it into the relationship that you developed with one of the best buyers who actually became a friend of yours, and kind of, what is your advice to them? How can they negotiate better with their landlords, with their suppliers, with everyone that they have to negotiate with? What is your advice?
So negotiation is a little bit different than selling. I'm just getting ready to high self-interest here for a moment. Just getting ready to launch the largest training program I've ever dreamed of in my life. It'll be a full 2-day, 2-workbook sales negotiation program. I'm calling it the Masterclass. And when you're selling, you're largely aspirational. So I don't believe in walking into somebody's building and saying, so where are you really hurting today? That's terrible. What a horrible way to start a conversation. I always want to walk in and say, your store looks really interesting. It's obviously got an amazing history. What's your vision going forward? I was talking to our friend Steve the other day when I was on his Outlaw podcast, and we got talking about the vision and the possibility that AI enters the mattress business. And he says, Pat, he says, believe it or not, we're right on the edge. And he said, it's not who you think it is. So back to the discussion with landlords. What I always want to know about when I talk to people like that is that if I'm going in and I'm going to rent some space, so let's say that I'm renting space and I don't know this person. What I want to know is what chattels in the building can I hope to inherit? Typically in the industry, what are they worth on the dollar after about 2 years? And I also want to know, what work has been done on the building. Has there been any problems with, things like, water, air conditioning? Because, to me, these things are critical. One of the you're going to laugh at this, Pete. One of the first things I do is make a beeline for the bathroom. I want to see what the bathrooms look like.
100%.
100%.
100%.
Can you
Tells you
imagine?
everything you need to know.
Can you imagine walking into a store and it's got this really cool ambiance. And then you walk into the bathroom and it's worse than any construction site you've ever seen. Construction sites, quite frankly, are pretty good because they maintain the portable washrooms because, let's face it, the guys are working really hard. They're working under a lot of duress. They're all under deadlines. And, your customer could be the very same thing. What if your customer walks in and you have no idea that they've got Crohn's or irritable bowel syndrome, they've got stomach problems, and they walk in and they've got that look. It's the look. And they're just saying, really quickly, where's your washroom? And please tell me it's not on the other side of your store.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had a dealer that was a great dealer, and they asked my advice on a building. And I said, how old is the building? The building was over 100 years old.
Oof.
And I said, how does it look to you? Looks great. We're ready to rent it. I said, okay, before you rent it, um, you really need to understand if there's asbestos in there, because sometimes asbestos is a deal killer.
Yeah, my high school got torn down because they sprayed asbestos all over the ceilings. And as kids, we would throw our pencils up into the ceiling to see how much of this fluffy stuff we could get to fall. I nearly bought a cottage up in the area here where I live now, and the panels looked odd to me. They were fibrous. They were blue, and I asked the owner, I said, any asbestos in there? And he goes, nah. And I'm thinking to myself, I'd like to have a piece of that analyzed. The other thing is, you want to go into the basement. The first place I had when I go, so I go to two places in a building. One, I want to go in the attic. The other is I want to go in the basement. Now, in an industrial space, the attic can sometimes be very close because, as we know, the showroom has become the warehouse. So you're actually seeing most of it there. But there are times when you buy an older building, you want to go down and you want to make sure that all of the support beams are there that should be there, because crazy people do crazy things. So I'll give you an example. In Turkey, they've just lost 32,000 people. And in one of the cases, a gym owner in a large building took out some of the support beams to create more space, open space for his gym. And that was one of the primary reasons that the building fell. So you'd say, well, that doesn't happen with houses or large buildings. I'm telling you, it does.
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
does. And, even in larger structures like barns. So my son was in the barn restoration business. And barns are because they're out in big open spaces, when tornadoes come through, sometimes they actually get lifted right off their footings.
Yeah.
And they get rested back down again. And farmers are famous for going in and taking all kinds of tension bars and trying to pull their building back into square again, right? It happens all the time. So people have to go to make hard calls on it. Same thing happens when you get into a historic building. Another problem with an historic building is that you get in there and you say, geez, I want to make a few renovations. The historical society shows up and says, all you can do in this building is paint, trim. Now, if it's if it's a bedroom that we haven't designated, then you can do something. If it's a patio outside that you want to add, you can do something. But the main structure of the building can't be changed.
Yeah. We had a situation where they wanted to put in replacement glass windows, and you couldn't. You had to hire a specialist to restore them exactly the way they were. And it was not once or twice or three or four or five times as much money. It was like astronomical. So some of these things, and this to me all goes under the broad, overly simple category of intel. And if you just want to really break it down simple, do your homework. And one of the pieces of doing your homework is understanding that some of the reasons that you want to rent this space might be in transit. They might be moving. I've had situations, Patrick, where the anchor that they depended on
Oh my God.
left.
I
And
know.
so I've
That's
coached
terrible.
all of my dealers that if you are dependent on an anchor, then you put it in the lease that if that anchor leaves, that creates an out for you.
That is one of the best negotiation tips I've heard in years. Honestly, it's really good, Pete.
I learned from the best.
You know what's funny is that once you get into the weeds, right? Once I one of the things that happened when I first opened up my business was I was writing about all of the edges of negotiation.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting down with the president of an advertising agency that I wanted to do some business with. And he's sitting there across from me and we're talking. And all of a sudden he says, I read everything you write. Oh, thanks. It's really nice of you. So let's sort of get back into what we were into here. And he said, no. He said, you just missed it, didn't you? I said, missed what? He said, you're writing about things that nobody else is writing about. And by the way, we don't have the guts to implement. That's how far out on the edge you are. And you're right. You're right. We have to have the courage to do it. It's one of the reasons why it's actually the foundation of that book happened in my new home here up in Bancroft. I was sitting in you call it like a lake house or a cabin in the States. We call them cottages up here, but it was actually a house. And I was sitting there, and I don't know why, but intuitively I knew that I was about to leave the corporate world. And I sat there one day and I thought, what are the worst things that anybody's ever done to me in a negotiation with no limits? And I wrote them all down. And I thought, where's the thematic here? What is the thematic?
Right.
And the thematic was not tactical. It wasn't. You see, this whole idea of the hostage negotiator, idea entering the sales world is just the wrong fit for sellers. Now, if buyers want to act crazy and hang their head and say, what'll I do? I don't know what to do, and all the rest of this stuff. I mean, yeah, you can act confused. I mean, Steve Kosick, my friend, who you mentioned, that was part of one of his strategic pieces in the strategy that I referred to as the bonus round. And he would just drag. He would in hockey we call it ragging the puck. It's where the puck goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and he would act confused until the person looked over and went, "Geez, Steve, what's wrong?" And he'd hang his head and he'd just go, "I don't know, man. The guys upstairs are just going to go nuts if I do this deal, and I just I don't know if I can play or whether I can't play, and God, jeez." Holy smokes, when I look at my desk here and I get thinking about all the things that I have to do here to convince my people internally, and the salesperson would just sitting there like this going, "Steve, whoa, we can help. We can do something." And Steve would suddenly lift up his head and say, "What do you got in mind?" And that's when the extra pieces come out. So years later, we're both retired. I retired very young, and we're on a golf course. And he said, "Did you like negotiating with me?" Oh, I said, "Oh, Steve." I said, "It was like watching Da Vinci or Michelangelo." I mean, you did things that nobody else was doing. And I was just sitting there, like this, I don't know, like a cat sitting on a fence looking down at, a dog fight, and I just know one of them was going to get hurt real bad. And what happens is with sellers, especially when they come from out of town. So in context, all right. So do you remember when Chicago was the retail capital of the world? It was the Sears Tower. Think about anybody who was anybody. That's where they went, right? That's where the retail conference that was held every year. It was always held in Chicago.
The
So you can
original,
imagine, you're from small town Florida, and there's a lot of Floridians that just never leave the state. They're there, and suddenly you're blasted into Chicago. Well, first of all, just going into that airport has got to make your hair stand on end.
yeah,
It's not like landing in Tampa. I'm sorry.
no, it's not.
Even Miami's not a big airport.
Nope.
Washington's a decent size, but it's not even gigantic. I mean, it's big, but it's Chicago, Atlanta, that gets your attention.
Yep. Yep. Did you know the original furniture market was in Chicago?
I didn't.
Way before High Point, Chicago was the place.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
Many years.
You think about the fashion business. The fashion business got split between LA, Chicago, and New York.
Mm-hmm.
That was it.
Yeah.
They were looking for all the street trends. Tommy Hilfiger was watching all of the young people, hanging out with their boom boxes, and he was looking to see what the preppies were doing. He was looking. Ralph Lauren did exactly the same thing, only he just kind of kicked it up a notch and made it a little bit more classy. And then suddenly he went into home fashion. The Ralph Lauren home fashion business was gigantic. It was huge.
Yep. Yep.
Still is.
For sure. Scott Vaughn, what did you say? My good friend Scott Vaughn. What did you say? Great advice on the anchor, Precious Pete. Yeah, do not sign a lease that's dependent on an anchor store without getting an out. Pat, what are the two keys of this? Is Guy Danes, or it might be.
No, it's Guy.
No, it's Guy. Pat, what are the two keys to negotiating in the B2B game? This is for our reps. Listen up, reps. All my rep friends, listen up. You're about to get some solid gold.
Yeah. If you can't think like an insider, you're not ready. That's number one. Number two, if you don't show up with the correct value equation in a B2B negotiation, you'll be escorted out of the building. I was once, so I worked at the Toronto Star, which was Canada's largest newspaper, 850,000 circulation on a Saturday in the old days, $20,000 to $40,000 a page on a Saturday. We went up to see one of the largest discounters in Canada. The company was called Byway. And we went up with what we thought was a smart proposal. And believe it or not, we used to fold them into our color comics in the newspaper because they just had like a lot of really odd looking merchandise. And if you know the deep discount business, it's like little kids clothing. It's kind of like a down market Kmart, if you can kind of get your head around that. And anyway, we walked in and he's got these little folding chairs and he's got bubbles on the table, and he's got little girls' dresses and nightgowns and all the rest of the stuff. There's these four guys from the Toronto Star, the big thinkers, right? Well, three. I'm not a big thinker, but they were big thinkers. So anyway, they started the proposal, and this guy who was their buyer was an MBA from Harvard University. So I mean, the Byway hired very good people. Right? His name was Russ Jacobson. I still remember him to this day. This happened back in 1981. So that's 21, 22 years ago. And it's February, just like right now. And he's looking at the proposal, and I could see him nodding. And then he'd had enough. And he goes, guys, look out the window there. What do you see? Oh, we all go, oh, Russ, what a horrible day. It's like last week here, up in my neck of the woods, it was 40 below zero. I had to change my car battery at 40 below zero. It went dead. So we're all looking out the window going, oh, geez, we want to be out of here. Let's get down to Florida. It's all this ice and snow and ice and snow. That's all we can see. He says, precisely, gentlemen. And you know what you're bringing me right now? This proposal is ice. You're bringing me ice in the winter. Meeting adjourned.
Wow. Do not bring ice in the middle of the winter.
No, you can just go outside and chop it up yourself. I'll sell you some up here.
Scott Vaughn is asking Patrick, what are your best tips on negotiating with sellers or lessors of commercial real estate? Well, we've got into that, but we can put a cherry on top of it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple other things. So if you've lost an anchor, all right, and your greatest concern is market composition, then you might be satisfied with the market composition and knowing that somebody's going to fill that anchor space later. Anchor spaces typically don't spend, they don't go into purgatory. Has it happened? The answer is yes. And the way that we really felt it badly up here in Canada was with Sears. And when Sears went out, a lot of stuff went out with it. And same with Zellers. When Marshalls bought it, they basically actually Target bought the stores, but they killed the brand. They just killed it. And so a lot of the shopping centers got stuck. The however in all of that is that if your target market is there, you have to almost weigh the following. Would I rather be in a more active retail setting 3 miles down the road where my customers don't exactly reside and have to travel by 3 of my competitors to get to my store? Or do I want to be in a setting where I get a better rate on my rent and I'm just going to have to advertise a little bit more? I'm going to have to get more creative, do more direct mail, do things that other people aren't doing. I mean, what's wrong with having a kids' day at a furniture store? Nothing wrong with it.
That's great stuff. Scott, my number one tip is this: do not fall in love with a location under any circumstances, because, and Pat goes into detail on this in his book and the whys and a lot. But when you fall in love with something, even if you rightly fall in love with it, even if it really is the best answer, do your best never to let your potential landlord see that you're in love with it, because if you do,
you're done.
Pay out your nose.
You're done. You're done.
And I'll let Patrick clean this up, because this
is
the mattress.
So here's a quick little story. About 9 years ago, I meet an intern who's going to go work at Colliers Real Estate here in Canada. He's still in university. He happens to walk by my booth when I was at an entrepreneur show, dropped his card in there. And I said, winner wins a half hour with Patrick Tinney. Long story short is, I looked at his card and I thought, I'm going to help this kid. I don't know why, it happened. So anyway, his name was Matt. And, I gave him my half an hour, and then we talked a few more times after that. And then, he's gotten really busy with his life, and he's doing pretty well at Colliers. He's had a couple of challenges, and he would every once in a while call up and just say, wow, just that something didn't happen that should have happened. What went wrong? So we talked. So anyway, last week on my LinkedIn feed, I now read that Matt is a vice president at Colliers. His deal book size in 9 years has grown to 150 million. And so I left him a message. He calls up and goes, Pat, how you doing, man? This is pretty exciting, isn't it? I go, yeah. I said, what, Matt? Where's my Matt Albertine friend, the little guy? Now I'm staring at this monster. I just said, I just want to congratulate you, and I'm so proud. I'm sure your parents are very proud for you too. And I said, I'm fried, man. I'm bleached. I've been working on a new program, and I've been going 24/7. So can we just set up some time later to talk? And I want to hear all about your ventures. He said, yeah. But he says, before we leave, You have to know something. I used one of your ideas, one of your things that you talked to me about in real estate. And I said, well, there's a whole pile of things that I talk about. Can you remind me which one it was? And he goes, yeah. He says, you told me that if I ever ran into a tough seller who was attached to his building, or she was attached to the property, this was your advice. Tell that person, your building doesn't know you're alive. It doesn't care about you. Your building is not emotional. You are emotional about your building. And he says, I got the listing. I convinced him that his building didn't know who he was.
That's great. That's amazing.
On the other hand, let me give you one more. I was doing some work for Factory Carpet up here in Canada when carpet was still big. So it's anything that goes on the floors. You got your liquidator group down in the United States that does floors. Obviously, Home Depot does a lot of floors, same as Lowe's. Anyway, they were trying to rapidly grow across Canada. And before anybody was doing sort of analysis on locations, I was into it. And their target market was families with children. They wanted mid to better income. They were not looking for senior citizens because senior citizens don't put any wear and tear on the property. And there was another group that they didn't want. I forget what it was. It doesn't come to mind right now. But anyway, when I sat down and did my analysis on their expansion into the Vancouver market, which here in Canada is a huge market, I mapped it all up. I took our Statistics Canada data, which is your census data in the United States. I matched it up, and then what I did was I poured it all into what would be your zip codes. In Canada here, we call them forward sortation areas. It's the same idea. They're just named differently. And I walked in and I sat in front of the advertising agency and I said, done some work for you. She goes, yeah. Yeah. I said, here's where your stores are. Here's where your locations are. Here's where your market is. Your stores are not where your customers are. As a matter of fact, you've been so desperate to buy space that you neglected to think about how many competitors that your ideal customer would have to pass by in order to get to you. So you're actually located in places where your customers are not. And it was like I dropped a grenade in her lap, and I just got up and walked out because I couldn't fix it.
Yeah, at least you got credit for being an expert.
Well, it was a time where, we were all trying to build the business case for, why things should happen. So I was very early into the mapping game here in Canada. As a matter of fact, I remember when I went over to our magazine division for a while, I wanted to prove to everybody that the magazines with, total market penetration were actually a viable vehicle for large advertisers. And so what I did was I plotted every major department store, junior department store, food store, and large pharmacy chain by city. And word got around in the building. And I had one of our new MBA guys walk up and he says, I hear you've done some mapping. I said, yeah. I don't think anybody's done this before. He says, can I have a look at it? I said, sure. So I've got 3 maps per market, say the 10 biggest cities in Canada. And he looks down at it. He says, do you know what this is worth? I said, I don't know. I've never seen it before. He said, Pat, he said very quickly, he said, if that isn't worth $100,000 in somebody's hands here today, I'd be shocked because nobody's got that information. Now, what happened, which was really funny, was my old boss on the retail team had heard I had done this, and he wanted to go down and see the boys in Bentonville at Walmart because it's when they first bought out Woolco here in Canada. And he said, I want those maps. I said, Don, I said, they're not quite done. I said, you know, we're moving locations like, you know, millimeters to get them correct, right? And he said, you're stalling on me. I said, I'm not stalling on you. He says, I'm going to go right to the CEO of this company if you don't give me those maps now. I'm going down to Bentonville and I want to impress these guys. And I said, I'm not certain about them. He said, I don't care. They look good to me. About 4 days later, he comes back and he comes into my office and he's blistering red-faced. And I said, how was your trip? And he goes, it was horrible. I said, why? He said, of all the stores that were on those maps, it was the Walmart locations that weren't right. Meeting adjourned. You see, you know, you have to be precise with retail. Retail is one of the most precision games in the world. A lot of people think that retail is this, this carnival that happens every day. It's not. It's science. You know, when I would walk into a store, first thing I would ask myself is, am I in a racetrack or am I in a grid? When I walk into a food store, if I'm standing at the front of the store, I can point immediately to my left as far as I can get away from that store, and I know exactly where the milk is going to be. The old food counters. Remember the old food counters, Pete?
The old what? Food counter.
Food counters. So when you walk into like a Kmart, a lot of the old department store retailers would have a little snack counter. And the reason that they had them was the moms would take their kids there because the kids hated shopping, especially in women's clothing, especially little boys. And so they would drop them off at the food counter, which never made any money, by the way. And the retailers knew it. But the two customers that they desperately wanted were women with children. And the other problem they had was filling their stores on Tuesdays. Tuesdays is the worst day in retail. You want to make friends? Walk into a retailer on Tuesday. They'll sit there and talk to you all day. Hi, you have a pulse?
Yeah. No doubt. Chris, are there any other questions that I didn't get to? Nope. Okay. I am going to do this very, very quickly. I'm going to read a chapter from my book.
Oh, love it.
Number 21.
I love that book.
Coach team members on page 35. Nicole, Wanda, and Scott, get your books out. Coach team members. There's a saying, inspect what you expect. And as business owners, we must stay on top of what employees and team members are doing. I wish it was different, but it isn't. You could implement every strategy in this book and still fail if your team is not on board and doing things in the way you need them done, especially if you have direct contact with prospects and customers. I've seen this happen more times than I like to remember. Where a store owner has done everything right and an employee undermines the entire system with the wrong attitude, behavior, or knowledge, it can kill a business. Don't let it happen to you. The best way to ensure your team has the same vision and follow through is to make them part of the marketing process and reward them for going the extra steps. Hold frequent marketing strategy meetings where everybody has input. Get team members buy-in and agreement with new marketing initiatives and systems. Help them realize their success is directly related to your customer success. As the owner, it's ultimately up to you to make sure employees and team members are doing the job you expect them to be doing. Stay on top of this all the time and see the difference it can make in your business. You might need to be patient with some of your employees at the beginning. Once they see and feel your commitment, they will come on board. If they don't, after a reasonable amount of time and consistent feedback, they might no longer be a fit for your company. Please do not arbitrarily fire anyone in my name. Only after they don't respond to feedback over time do I suggest the F word. What say you, Patrick? What say you?
Um, there's a lot to unpack there. Boy, you piled a lot in one spot. To me, there is an expectation when you walk through the doors of any retail operation. It was Morris Saffer here in Canada who said the store is the brand. And he changed the whole idea of how we think about retail. I think Walmart pretty much did the same thing. And there was some retail brands that just didn't get it. Sears never got it. I don't know how they stayed in business. They just didn't understand. They didn't understand that they actually had a female shopper. So what would I be thinking if I was in the furniture business? Well, I would say a couple of things. First of all, your store is a beautiful, beautiful place. And if a customer comes in, you have a very rare opportunity. And the rare opportunity is as follows. There's more people buying stuff online than at any other time in the history of man, outside of the old, Sears catalog days. And then you lived up in the boonies, and that's why you bought stuff that way, right? So when somebody comes into your store, if it was me, I would have my sales reps with a list of about 20 really good questions to ask different groups like seniors, groups like families with children, and groups that look mid to better. And by the way, never judge a customer by the way that they're dressed. That'll kill you every time. You're always going to get it wrong. The other thing is, I would, because your customers are buyers, I would do my best to understand what buyer negotiation strategy really means in the greatest sense of the word. Now, on the back of Unlocking Yes, the Revised Edition, I give you 25 and I unbundle them. If you, Steve Hawk last week, we were talking about, strategy, and he said to me, he said, Pat, he said, you told me that if I memorized the 25 strategies at the back of your book, that if I just did that, your book would be worth much more than I ever would have imagined. And so, you know what? Give him credit. He started grinding away at that book. And I think that Steve is now thinking on a different level about strategy. Because what you want to do is you want to reroute what I would call nefarious angelic strategy. This is a mode that buyers slip into. So it's almost like where they're, if you've ever done any bass fishing and you got a popper, you're just trying to pop that bait across the top of the pond and get that largemouth just to get to the point where they go, I just can't take it anymore. I just can't take it anymore. I just can't take it anymore. The other thing is if a customer looks like they're qualified and you just haven't figured out what it is that they want, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to just sort of say, we've been talking quite a bit here right now. In the very simplest words possible, can you explain to me what it is that you, in a perfect world, what you really want, even if you don't find it here, because next time you come in, I might just have it, or it might come in, and if you'll allow, I'll put your email address into my database, and as soon as that arrives, like if we don't have the kind of home fashion that you want in the new blue or the new black or the new orange or the new cream, I mean, I'll be on the phone for you right away, and just and I'll put a hold on something for you. I actually called in to tell my battery went dead last week, and I put a hold on a battery in at a Canadian Tire store. Now, you'd think that's kind of a weird thing to do, but you know what? Scarcity is your greatest friend in retail.
Yep.
So if you think back to the Cabbage Patch dolls, people would crawl over broken glass to get those. So if you've got a unique thing that your store does, then create a scarcity environment. And the scarcity environment is, you might do a remote in your store, and you might have the person from the radio station. Here I am selling radio, which sounds kind of odd, but anyway, you have the person on remote saying, "You're not going to believe this, Larry King live, but we've only got 9 left. Oh, sorry, 8. Oh my God, better get down here quick." And you can just hear all the car engines starting, to head down. The last thing is, try not to let the customer out of the store. Figure out a way to get them back in. Just as they're getting to the front door, just say, "God, you look parched. I've got a soft drink in the back. Would you like that?" And we can just sit and talk about your family. Let's not talk about what I've got anymore. Let's just talk for a couple of minutes. And I want you to remember me. And I want you to come back. Because here's the thing, especially in the furniture business. If a customer leaves the store and they go home and they start to, measure space over and over and over again, they've got you. They've got you, because then they can call up and they can say, "Darn, I thought that thing that you showed me was going to fit, but it's not going to fit. I'd have to redo my whole room, which means I'm going to have to take some budget and reallocate it to making my room fit your furniture. How are you going to address that?" I just asked for a discount.
That's great stuff. I just want to put a cherry on top of the sundae that you created for our retailers. Tell a good story. What I used to do when I was in retail, because it was true, when I found myself in a situation where I'd pretty much exhausted everything and the customer was on their way out and I wanted to get their contact information, I would tell them, "You don't know how many times that I've talked to somebody and they wanted something that I didn't have, and it came in the next day, exactly what they described."
Mm-hmm.
And I thought they were crazy, and I thought it doesn't exist, and there it is right there. So do you mind if I just grab your phone number real quick, or your email, whatever is easiest for you? And I won't call you unless the perfect thing shows up here. If
That's
it
the
does,
key.
I'll be sure to call you.
One more thing I would add.
Go
I've
ahead.
just added this to my new negotiation program, and it's a causality question, and it's the one that will drive people crazy. So let's say that somebody is that close to buying, but they don't. For some reason, it's just like they can't wrap their head around it. And I had a guy who was at one of my book signings, and he walked up. He stood in a line. I used to sign quite a few books, and he was a lawyer. And he stood there and he goes, "Why do I need your book, Unlocking Yes?" I said, "What do you do?" He said, "Well, I'm in the corporate space." He said, "I do M&As. I do, really large deals." I said, "What's your net payout on average?" He said, $50,000 to $75,000. We do fairly large, family-sized businesses. Could be like the furniture business where you've got like 10 locations, right? So anyway, I said, "Right, I got it. Yeah. No, all I can say is it's a really good book, being very well received, and people are making money with my book. But it sounds like you don't need any help." He goes, "That's what I thought." So he turned around, he walked away. I waited till he put his hand on the handle of the door just as he was walking out, because my locations for the book signings were always about 20 yards away from the front door, right? And I said, "By the way, the next time you lose one of those $50,000 to $75,000 paydays over a negotiation that went wrong, just remember that you could have owned it for $24.99. He spun on his heels, came back, ripped the book out of my hand, and said, "Give me that freaking book." So you can do that with a if you're in a retail location and you say, "Geez, we're down to our last 3. What if you leave here right now and go to my competitors and somebody walks in," and this happens all the time in the fashion business. Have you ever walked into a store and you go, "Oh man, that is like the best pair of slacks or the best shirt I've seen forever, but I just don't have time to try it, right? And then you come back 2 days later and there's none left. So
Sure.
the causality question is really a kind of a futuristic question, which is supposed to create emotion, and the emotion is I missed out.
Right.
It's the emotion of loss. And if there's one thing that bugs us in the world, it's that I had my hands on it,
right,
and I didn't buy it.
Yep, 100%. Pat, thank you so much. I cannot believe it's been an hour, and I'm about ready to get the boot off the air. But just take a minute or two. Tell us what you're up to, and tell us, for those who didn't know you before, and everybody should know who you are, how do they get in touch with you, and what are you up to? What's the next newest, biggest thing? I'm always saying forward to you, because he's the author of three great books, soon to be 4 whenever he gets around it. Tell us what you're up to and how to get a hold of you.
Well, go up into any search engine and put in Patrick Tinney, sales author, and it lights up like a Christmas tree these days. I've been honored, Pete, to sit with you and our friend Christone on a number of occasions. I think this may be number 4, which is a new world record. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm there. I've got just under 9,000 followers, and they're almost all in sales. It's the way that I've designed my profile. I have 3 programs right now that are just knockouts. So if you said, geez, Pat, we don't have much budget, that's okay. I've got a program that I ran for Microsoft last year. It's on buyer negotiation strategy. It's about an hour long, and it's where I outline the 10 ugliest buyer strategies you've ever seen in your life. Now, as a furniture owner, you may want to use them. As a seller, you may want to be aware of them so you can reroute customers and get them into the right collaborative space, when, especially if they're coming in to buy like a whole room setting. Let's say someone comes in and says, you know, hey, listen, like I want to be ready for Christmas and I want all new stuff, and they've got the money, right? So the second one is I've produced a sales, prospecting, consultative selling, and sales negotiation evenly paced, evenly broken up program that gets delivered in one day. I can do it in person and I can do it virtually. Honest to God, folks, I've been working on this for about 15, 16 years, and I'm not going to touch this again. That's how good it is. So let's say that you've got somebody that you really want to bring up in your organization, you want to refresh them, and you want to take them through the whole panoramic view that we call sales, then you're ready. Just last week, I completed the new Centroid sales negotiation masterclass. It is massive. The slide deck alone is 120 slides deep. It's so big, it's going to require 2 workbooks. That's the cover art that's going to go in this program. And the one thing I know for sure, so for years, I only ran a half-day sales negotiation program because I was able to pack so much into it that people would get their money back on the first couple of questions they asked using my techniques. A 2-day program, I'm pulling out all the secret sauce. I'm going to show you things you'd never dreamed of. And one of the really cool ones is cost modeling up, cost modeling down. And I can actually show you that none of us sees numbers the same way. We all kind of visually, wow, Pete sees numbers the same way Pat does. I can tell you he doesn't. There's a slight difference between the way that we see numbers. And that has an impact on how it is that we buy or sell. And if you understand that, then you're going to be really strong. The SWOT analysis, let's say you've got a commercial division, and you got a guy that comes in and says, I just bought a building. I need it filled in. Then you've got to have somebody who knows how to handle that kind of a conversation. So a SWOT analysis on a deal is really important. Most people can't do it. The ones that do master it, I know you have, Pete, but the ones that do master it, it just changes your life because you think in SWOT. You're either thinking in leverage or you're thinking in business implications, which is the scary stuff that happens in the middle of the night. And the last thing is is obviously I'm embedding a lot of strategy in this program. 15 exercises or 16, it's gigantic. And I also put in my staircase approach to asking questions. I use about 6 different varieties of questions. And very rarely do I directly ask for a deal, only under one circumstance. And that's if I run out of time, or if I see no more impediments. If customers stand there, you answered every question they've got, they just say, I can't see an impediment here. If you see one, can you describe to me what it is? And if they can't describe to you what it is, then you just say, so why are you going to leave without this merchandise? You'll hate yourself if it's not here tomorrow.
That's awesome. Guys, thank you for being with us. And Patrick, thank you for being with us. Any other way to get a hold of you, or are those all the primary ways?
Just pick up the phone. I'm a phone guy. I love the phone. All this baloney about social media, all of these prospect king guys and all the rest of it. I'm the most boring man in the world. You want to know why? I just want to talk to you. I want to listen to you. I want to hear about your vision of tomorrow.
There you go. And you just got a master lesson right there, guys. Patrick, what's the phone number you want them to call you at?
416.
Yep.
617.
Yep.
3271. Think $.
Awesome. 416-617-3271. Patrick, thank you for your time and thank you for your knowledge. But most importantly, thank you for your insights. You always give us a new way of thinking that helps us close more sales. And you are the master's master. So I'm going to say this very quickly before we say goodbye. So when one of the top sales gurus in the industry wanted to bone up on negotiations and wanted to offer a course on negotiations, who did he call? Patrick Tinney. And that is all I'm going to say. When the elite sales trainers of our day are calling Patrick and asking him to do courses for him, that tells me everything I need to know. You have a master here, and thank you so much, Patrick.
You know, Pete, you have a nice way of framing things. You're a gentleman. Thank you. You're an honorary Canadian. You're that good.
Thank you, Patrick. And thank you, everyone in our audience. Have a great day. Thank you.
Rock and roll.